Imagine an engine engineered for absolute efficiency. As it accelerates to its maximum theoretical output, the sheer force strips the gears, destroying the mechanism that allowed it to run in the first place. Artificial intelligence is systematically replacing human labor across the global economy. When workers lose their jobs faster than the market can create new ones, aggregate consumer demand physically shrinks. Consumer demand is the sole source of corporate revenue. Without people capable of buying products, the companies producing those products cannot survive. Business strategists and policymakers are well aware of this trajectory, but as economists Brett Hemingway Falk and Jerry Tsoukalos demonstrate in their 2026 paper, The AI Layoff Trap, that awareness is mathematically irrelevant. Firms are caught in a structural trap. They classify this dynamic as an automation arms race. To understand how we fix this, we have to map the exact competitive model driving the displacement, test why popular patches like universal basic income mathematically fail, and identify the single policy tool capable of restabilizing the market. Understanding the mechanics of this trap is the only way to avoid a total collapse of consumer markets. We start by isolating a single firm's decision-making process. Economists use a task-based model to analyze labor. In this framework, creating a good or service is simply a sequence of discrete tasks. This animated diagram shows a standard production pipeline. For every step in the sequence, the firm calculates the marginal cost. It evaluates whether it is cheaper to assign human labor, the blue notes, or swap in an AI system, the red notes. But there is a secondary effect. Those human wages feed a connected aggregate demand pool at the bottom of the screen. Here is the critical asymmetry. When the firm automates a task, it captures 100% of the immediate cost savings, but the resulting drop in consumer demand is dispersed across the entire economy. The firm only feels a tiny fraction of the pain. Now we scale this up. In a competitive market, dozens or hundreds of identical firms draw from that exact same central aggregate demand pool. Firm A aggressively swaps human labor for AI to lower its production costs. It drops its prices, allowing it to immediately siphon market share from its competitors. Firms B, C, and D are now at a severe disadvantage. To avoid bankruptcy, they must replicate Firm A's cost structure. This is a classic tragedy of the commons. Because every firm is reacting to immediate competitive pressure, they collectively automate well beyond the optimal point. The demand pool dries up, and the entire market turns gray. By acting rationally at the micro level, they destroy their own macroeconomic environment. Falk and Tsoukalos' model reveals two aggravating variables. First, a highly competitive market strictly accelerates the cycle. Second, as AI technology becomes cheaper and more capable, the scale of excess labor displacement increases proportionately. Standard market self-corrections cannot arrest the cycle. Allowing new firms to enter the market or allowing human wages to fall fails to stabilize the system. The invisible hand actively drives the market into failure because the micro incentive to automate is completely decoupled from the macro requirement of consumer stability. Current tech policy proposals attempt to fix this problem by treating the symptoms rather than the disease. The most prominent assumption is that universal basic income will act as a safety net. UBI is a post hoc wealth transfer. It moves money around after the labor displacement has already occurred. Watch how this fails at the firm level. Here is the automation engine, actively converting human labor into AI. We apply a UBI patch, injecting capital directly into the demand pool. But the firm's marginal cost calculation hasn't changed. AI remains cheaper than labor. The demand pool stays full, but the automation engine continues to strip human workers out of the production sequence. Another common proposal is aggressive upskilling. Training labor to perform more complex tasks does not alter the fundamental equation. An AI replacing a discrete, highly skilled task still costs the firm less than the human equivalent, so the swap continues. The same logic applies to capital income taxes and worker equity participation. These interventions place a net at the very end of the pipeline to redistribute aggregate profit, but they completely ignore the localized displacement event happening at the front of the line. Even Keynesian bargaining, private negotiations where workers might pay firms to retain their jobs, collapses here. It requires impossible coordination. millions of independent workers cannot seamlessly negotiate with thousands of competing firms simultaneously. Treating the macroeconomic aftermath is useless if the microeconomic equations driving the displacement remain exactly the same. To stabilize the market, the economic incentive must be intercepted at its absolute source. The mathematical model points to a singular viable solution, a Pigouvian automation tax. Unlike a standard capital tax on end-of-year profits, a Pigouvian tax targets a specific behavior. It applies a targeted cost directly to the localized event of a firm automating a task. This forces the individual firm to internalize the macroeconomic cost of lost consumer demand. When the cost of the tax is added to the AI node, the equation shifts. The pipeline stops its total conversion and settles into a stable equilibrium of both human and automated tasks. By injecting friction at the exact point of decision, the excess displacement stops. The aggregate demand pool is preserved. This is not a ban on automation, nor does it halt artificial intelligence research. It simply acts as a governor on the engine, recalibrating the speed of AI adoption so that it perfectly matches the rate at which the wider economy can reabsorb displaced workers. We have to stop building policies designed to manage the casualties of the transition. To survive the integration of artificial intelligence, structural economic policy must systematically reprogram the competitive incentives of the firm. Only then can we finally align the microeconomics of the corporation with the macroeconomic survival of the consumer.